The story begins with the Ferda Rosnova receiving a cruel proposal from his father. He is given only two choices. He must either become engaged to Grand Duchess Valdrova, who is actually a dragon, or be cast out of the Rosnova family. To Ferda, those words feel like a death sentence for a noble. Rejecting the engagement means losing his family forever, while accepting it means certain death at the hands of a dragon. Even so, Ferda desperately wants to remain a member of the Rosnova family. As the frail third son of a knight family, born to a concubine, he has never had anyone on his side. He spends years enduring every hardship, believing that constant effort would one day earn him recognition. Unfortunately, his family's eyes had already turned away from him long ago. After realizing the painful truth, Ferda chooses to leave the Rosnova family on his own. With that decision, he is officially disowned and expelled from the family. As he walks away, his resentment continues to grow. Although his father knew how hard he had struggled, he still abandoned him. From that moment onward, Ferda swears to make the entire family regret throwing him away. That very day, Ferda awakens as a mage at the age of 18. Compared to other trainees, his awakening comes far too late. Every mage draws power from the mana within them, but Ferda's mana is different. His magic is fueled entirely by hatred and vengeance. The more hatred he carries, the stronger his power becomes. After spending years accumulating that hatred, Ferda eventually reaches the 6th circle and becomes an archmage. Once he gains that overwhelming power, the first place he returns to is his former home, the Rosnova family. He manipulates the servants who once mocked him and forces them to kill one another. He then fills the eldest and second sons with hatred until they destroy each other. Finally, only one person remains, the man with whom Ferda shares the deepest hatred of all, his own father. After witnessing the destruction of the Rosnova family, Ferda's father completely loses his spirit and begs Ferda to end his life. Ferda calmly tells him to take a closer look at the proud Rosnova family he had built with his own hands. With everyone dead, Ferda watches his father break down as the nightmare unfolds before his eyes. Soon, everything connected to the Rosnova family disappears. Even after achieving his revenge, Ferda realizes that it is still not enough. His hatred and anger refuse to fade, and instead spread across the entire continent. As a result, countless powerful figures come after him with their swords drawn. Despite facing them all, Ferda survives once again and reaches the highest realm any human has ever attained. He becomes an 8th circle great mage. Even then, his enemies continue to resent him. He knows they will seek revenge at any moment, just as he once did. Because of that, he decides to become even stronger. His next goal is the realm beyond humanity itself, the 9th circle, the realm of a demigod. To reach that level, he needs overwhelming power. However, achieving the 9th circle requires the heart of the Crimson Dragon, Grand Duchess Valdrova. For that reason, Ferda decides to kill the dragon and claim her heart. But fate has something far crueler in store. Soon, a fierce battle erupts between Ferda and Valdrova. Both of them suffer severe injuries during the fight. Valdrova finds it ironic that the man who was once meant to become her fiancé has now come to kill her. Ferda declares that she should quietly die by his hands. Valdrova calmly explains that she knows humans call her a tyrant. However, she cannot understand why. She reveals that she has never once appeared before humanity, not even before Ferda was born. Instead, she has always remained far away from the human world. Unable to understand the hatred directed toward her, she wonders what grudge could have filled him with such hostility. Hearing that, Ferda blames her for everything. In his eyes, she is the cause of all his misfortune. He explains that her selfish desire to find a human fiancé led to his expulsion from the Rosnova family. Valdrova questions whether that is truly her fault. Ferda insists that her greed to take a human as her mate is exactly what ruined his life. After hearing his answer, Valdrova slowly raises her hand. At the same time, Ferda activates his magic circle, preparing for another attack. However, instead of striking Ferda, Valdrova thrusts her own hand into her chest. The unexpected sight leaves Ferda completely stunned. Valdrova reminds him that his magic requires a dragon's heart. Ferda immediately believes she is trying to destroy the heart. To him, that heart is the only chance to reach the 9th circle. Without hesitation, he attacks her once more. But to his surprise, Valdrova willingly offers her heart to him instead. Unable to understand her actions, Ferda questions why she would go this far. He realizes that even in her final moments, she could have easily killed someone like him. Valdrova admits that she knows she could have done so. However, she chooses not to because she believes he became miserable because of her. She then reveals the truth she has carried for a long time. She has always hated herself. She hated the vicious dragon blood flowing through her veins. She hated the uncontrollable urge to rage and destroy everything without reason. She hated the version of herself she could never stop. She believed her very existence only brought fear to others. She thought that if she simply died, everything would finally be resolved. Even so, she once wished to find happiness while still alive. She calls that wish a foolish dream that only caused suffering for countless people. Since everyone became miserable because of her, she hopes that at least Ferda can find happiness through her sacrifice. She believes that this is the final thing she can do for him. After hearing those words, Ferda experiences emotions he cannot understand. An overwhelming feeling of uneasiness fills his heart. He convinces himself that Valdrova is merely trying to confuse him until the very end. He forces himself to remember why he came there. The ninth circle is finally within his reach. The essence of a dragon that has lived for ages now lies before him. By absorbing it, he believes he will surpass humanity itself. He believes he will be reborn as a demigod. With that conviction, Ferda absorbs Valdrova's heart. The moment he does, something strange begins happening to him. He cannot understand what is going on. Even though he is certain he absorbed the dragon's heart, it feels as though he has fallen into a bottomless swamp. At first, he assumes it is simply the effect of consuming the heart. Then an enormous wave of emotions floods into him. He realizes those emotions belong to Valdrova. He witnesses an ancient despair far greater than anything he had ever experienced himself. At the same time, he sees a lonely yet gentle soul that tried to embrace the entire world until her very last moment. In that instant, his own hatred and anger suddenly feel incredibly insignificant. Overwhelmed with regret, Ferda realizes what he has done. He begins questioning everything he had been chasing. Becoming a great mage no longer matters. Revenge no longer matters. Even ascending as a demigod no longer matters. Deep inside, he finally realizes the only thing he ever truly wanted. He simply wanted to have a family. He simply wanted to live a peaceful life. Thinking about Valdrova once more, he realizes that perhaps she wished for the very same thing. But that realization comes far too late. She has already died by his own hands. Now everything feels meaningless. At that moment, Ferda prepares to cast the one and only spell that a ninth circle mage can use. Suddenly, his eyes open. To his shock, he finds himself standing before his father once again. His father scolds him for ignoring him while he is speaking. Ferda is left speechless. He clearly remembers that his father had become crippled and eventually died. He immediately realizes that he has somehow returned to that very day. His father once again announces that Ferda's engagement to Duchess Valdrova has been decided. He also repeats that refusing the engagement will result in expulsion from the family. This time, however, Ferda steps forward without hesitation. Unlike before, he immediately accepts the engagement. Ferda, the second son of the Rosanova family, became the center of everyone's attention after agreeing to an engagement that most people viewed as a death sentence. The decision stunned his older brother, Hurin, who could hardly believe the news. In his eyes, Ferda had never been the kind of person to willingly accept a fate that promised only ruin. After learning that Ferda had dismissed every servant and locked himself inside his room before departure, Hurin assumed his younger brother had finally broken under the pressure. Expecting to witness fear and despair, he went to confront him. Instead, Hurin found Ferda calmly preparing for the journey on his own. There was no sign of panic or hesitation. When questioned about his unusual behavior, Ferda explained that he was simply getting used to living without servants, since his future would no longer include the privileges of his family. Hurin remained suspicious and wondered whether Ferda truly understood the consequences of accepting the engagement. Ferda made it clear that he knew exactly what awaited him. By accepting the proposal, he had effectively cut himself off from the Rosanova family forever. Hurin mocked his decision, insisting that the engagement was nothing more than a path toward destruction. He reminded himself of the grim history surrounding Valdrova's former grooms, whose position had never remained occupied for long. Long before, the first man chosen as Valdrova's groom had been the Empire's third prince. Gifted with exceptional intelligence and striking appearance, he had even abandoned his claim to the throne for the opportunity. Yet only one day after reaching Valdrova's territory, he was discovered in a horrifying condition. His body had been brutally beaten, and his vacant eyes reflected a man whose spirit had been completely shattered. Hurin could not understand why Ferda believed he would survive an ordeal that had nearly destroyed someone as capable as the third prince. Although he considered the decision foolish, he warned himself that if Ferda attempted to flee from the engagement, he would personally end the matter before Valdrova ever had the chance. Ferda remained completely unmoved by the threats. Instead, he silently reflected on Huron's inability to control himself, and remembered the shameful feelings his older brother secretly harbored toward their eldest brother's wife. Knowing that weakness was enough to prevent Huron from acting recklessly, Ferda focused on preserving his appearance, realizing that the long journey ahead was only beginning. When the time came to leave, the estate's elderly butler tearfully bid farewell. Outwardly, the old servant behaved as though serving Ferda had been an honor, but Ferda remembered a far different reality. During his childhood, he had believed his weak body resulted from poor health, only to later discover that the servants had been secretly poisoning his meals all along. Although memories of those betrayals filled him with disgust and awakened an urge for revenge, Ferda chose not to act on those emotions. He simply thanked the butler for his years of service, while subtly reminding him of the hardships they had both endured. After entrusting his family to the servant's care, Ferda stepped into the carriage without looking back. As the carriage rolled toward its destination, Ferda realized something had changed within him. The burning hatred that once controlled every aspect of his life had finally disappeared. Having already taken revenge in another lifetime, he no longer carried the endless rage that had once consumed him. He reflected on the red magic fueled by hatred that he had relied upon in the past. At first, its intoxicating power had been exhilarating, but over time it became impossible to control. Like a dangerous addiction, it slowly poisoned both his mind and soul, until violence and destruction became the only emotions he could feel. Now, for the first time in years, he experienced genuine peace and found the quiet surprisingly comforting. Eventually, the carriage reached the border of Valdrova's territory. A lonely wooden sign stood at the forest entrance, warning outsiders that entry beyond that point was forbidden. After stepping down from the carriage, Ferda calmly waited with his luggage, while the frightened coachman hurried away, eager to leave the cursed place behind. Left alone, Ferda considered relying on simple fourth circle magic if wild beasts appeared. Before long, a gust of wind stirred the forest, drawing his attention toward a mysterious figure concealed among the trees. A young maid emerged from the shadows and introduced herself as Ruri, one of Valdrova's loyal attendants. After confirming Ferda's identity, she led him toward the castle. As they walked through the vast forest, Ferda reflected on the reputation surrounding Valdrova. The people of the Arkan Empire proudly boasted of their own strength, while ignoring the reality beyond their borders. In the eastern reaches of the continent lay lands overrun by demons and monstrous creatures, yet it was Valdrova alone who had stopped their advance and protected the empire from constant invasion. Despite those achievements, countless rumors painted her as a terrifying tyrant raising an army of monsters. Ferda believed such accusations were deeply unfair, especially since those spreading the stories lacked the courage to confront the dragon directly. During their journey, wolves silently surrounded the path. Noticing Ferda's awareness of the danger, Ruri used protective magic that ensured the beasts would not attack while they remained together. Curious about the remaining distance, Ferda learned that reaching the castle would still require 2 hours of walking. When he questioned how Ruri had traveled the same route so quickly, he discovered that she could have reached the destination in only seconds by flying. That answer confirmed Ferda's suspicion that Ruri was no ordinary servant. She was a powerful dragon spawn, whose true appearance remained hidden beneath a human disguise. Confident in his own abilities, Ferda suggested taking to the skies instead of continuing on foot. However, the idea was immediately dismissed, leaving him with no choice but to endure the exhausting journey through the forest. After a long march, they finally arrived before the massive gates of Valdrova's castle. Even from outside, Ferda could feel an overwhelming pressure radiating from within. The dragon's presence alone carried unimaginable power. Ruri entered the castle to deliver news of his arrival, while Ferda waited outside. Hoping to meet Valdrova directly, he found that request denied. Instead, Ruri returned with an official message, explaining that although his courage was acknowledged, Valdrova had no desire to continue a marriage arranged against her will. Being offered the chance to leave surprised Ferda. In his previous life, he would have accepted without hesitation. This time, however, everything was different. No one had forced him to come. Remaining there was entirely his own decision. Determined to proceed, Ferda refused to abandon the engagement. Ruri reluctantly carried his answer back inside, before returning once more, this time with an enormous sack overflowing with gold. The wealth was presented as compensation, so he could begin a new life elsewhere. Ferda ignored the fortune completely. Neither power nor riches held any appeal for him. His only wish was to fulfill the engagement with Valdrova. His unwavering determination finally exhausted Ruri's patience. Frustration quickly turned into anger as she unleashed her true nature. Horns emerged from her head, sharp claws extended from her hands, and a massive reptilian tail appeared behind her. A powerful green aura erupted around her as she released the terrifying force known as Dragon Fear. The overwhelming pressure slammed Ferda to the ground. Ruri believed that every human who sought Valdrova did so out of greed and ambition. From her perspective, mortals desired nothing more than power over dragons. Only then did Ferda fully understand why the third prince had met such a miserable fate. His arrogance and hidden ambitions had been obvious from the very beginning. Rather than seeking companionship, the prince had viewed the marriage as a means to dominate and exploit Valdrova. Seeing no difference between Ferda and the previous groom, Ruri pinned him to the ground with her claws and silently judged him to be another selfish human, destined for the same tragic end. Even while trapped beneath the immense pressure, Ferda remained calm. Instead of resisting with violence, he silently reaffirmed his sincerity. He had not come because of coercion, wealth, or political ambition. In another life, Valdrova had sacrificed even her own heart to save someone as undeserving as he had once been. Remembering that sacrifice, Ferda made a silent vow to himself. This time he would stand beside Valdrova, not for personal gain, but because he genuinely wished to become her groom and protect the one who had once saved him. Hearing Ferda insist that, as his future wife, Valdrova should speak to him directly, instead of through a servant, Ruri was enraged. She attacked in anger but suddenly stopped herself, excused herself, and returned to the castle to report his words. Before the Grand Duchess, Ruri faithfully repeated everything. Valdrova, appearing in her elegant human form, was surprised by Ferda's boldness and became curious about him. Although Ruri criticized him as physically weak, she admitted he was handsome, and more importantly, unlike any ordinary human. Even after experiencing her full dragon fear, he had shown no fear at all. Pleased by this, Valdrova smiled, happy that she had finally met a human capable of looking her in the eyes and speaking to her normally. She decided to continue with the engagement. Ruri informed Ferda of the decision and escorted him to his guest room. Ferda was surprised by how clean and well-maintained the castle was, learning that Ruri alone handled every task besides serving Valdrova. Since the marriage had not yet taken place, she insisted on treating him only as a guest. She explained that the engagement ceremony would be held 1 month later inside the dragon's lair. However, she imposed her own condition. During those 30 days, Ferda had to prove he was worthy of becoming Valdrova's partner. She admitted the challenge came from herself, not her mistress, because she refused to allow just anyone to remain by the dragon's side. Even with his frail body, he had to demonstrate genuine potential. Rather than feeling offended, Ferda admired Ruri's unwavering loyalty to Valdrova. At the same time, he wondered why such faithful companions had not been there during the tragic end of his previous life. He accepted the challenge without hesitation, understanding that proving himself meant surpassing even the standards expected of an emperor. His confidence only made Ruri more suspicious. That night, Ferda reflected on his greatest weakness. He currently possessed no magic. Although he had once reached the 9th circle as an archmage, he had lost everything after time rewound. He remembered that the first circle determined the foundation of every mage. A blue circle was formed through calm meditation, while the red circle drew power from hatred, the same dangerous path that had nearly destroyed him before. This time he chose the peaceful path instead. A week passed as Ferda tirelessly meditated, repeatedly trying to create a blue circle. Despite his past memories, every attempt failed. Knowing that forming one naturally required years, and only 3 weeks remained before the engagement, he realized time was running out. During one of his failed attempts, Ruri visited his room and noticed that he still seemed unchanged. While Ferda calmly continued eating and insisted he would eventually succeed, he privately admitted he needed another approach. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the castle. Ruri explained that Valdrova was outside hunting monsters, invading from the eastern lands. Curious, Ferda decided he wanted to witness the battle himself. Ruri warned that an ordinary human could never withstand such a sight, and mocked the idea, but Ferda insisted that seeing the battle was the duty of the dragon's future companion. Reluctantly, Ruri carried him through the sky with her dragon wings. After landing on a cliff overlooking the battlefield, Ferda struggled with the overwhelming speed before turning his attention to the valley below. The scene left him speechless. A dark valley swarmed with gigantic monsters, and in the middle of the battlefield, Valdrova's enormous red dragon form dominated everything. She effortlessly tore through massive serpents with her claws, crushed them with her jaws, and unleashed an immense breath of fire that incinerated everything in its path. Her thunderous roar sent a devastating shockwave across the valley. Even from the cliff, Ferda was overwhelmed by the sheer pressure of her power. His body trembled, cold sweat covered his face, and he collapsed to his knees as the dragon's aura crushed his spirit. Watching his reaction, Ruri reminded him that this terrifying dragon was the being he intended to marry, and questioned how an ordinary human could ever hope to stand beside someone so overwhelmingly powerful. Looking down, she noticed his hand pressed against the ground, and saw that his body was trembling beneath the crushing pressure. To her, his reaction only confirmed everything she had warned him about. Ruri explained that the blood of a red dragon carried an untamable and violent nature. Such beings were born with an overwhelming instinct for destruction, and possessed a terrifying presence that no ordinary person could endure. She believed this was proof that living beside a dragon meant facing constant danger. In her mind, humans and dragons could never truly stand as equals, and she was convinced her mistress would eventually realize that this engagement could never succeed. To her surprise, Ferda slowly lifted his head with a gentle smile. Instead of fear, his eyes were filled with admiration and awe as he gazed toward Valdrova's true form. Ruri was stunned that the terrifying display had inspired wonder rather than dread. Taking an uneasy step backward, she began to question whether the young man was simply fearless or completely insane. Later that night, after returning to the quiet castle beneath a peaceful moonlit sky, Ferda rested in his room and reflected on everything that had happened. Even though he had mentally prepared himself before witnessing the battle, the dragon's overwhelming aura, roar, and dragon fear had pushed his body to its limits. He remembered how Ruri had carried him back after the battle, exhausted herself from the tremendous speed of the journey. Despite everything, he considered it a miracle that his mind had remained intact. As he replayed every moment of the battle in his thoughts, Ferda wondered why he had insisted on witnessing such a dangerous scene in the first place. Then a sudden realization struck him. The terrifying spectacle had not driven him away. Instead, it had awakened a genuine desire to see Valdrova again. He reflected on the dragon tirelessly defending the eastern border, relentlessly tearing apart monsters to protect the people and the land she cared about. To Ferda, her actions resembled those of a noble knight who willingly accepted endless hardship for the sake of others. Standing by the open window with his arms spread, as a cool breeze passed through the room, he admired her unwavering resolve. He smiled softly, realizing how extraordinary it was that someone as remarkable as Valdrova had agreed to accept him as her future partner. At that very moment, a powerful crimson energy suddenly gathered around his hands. Ferda immediately recognized it as the formation of a red circle. Alarmed, he desperately tried to suppress it, refusing to repeat the mistakes that had consumed his previous life. However, as he carefully observed the mana itself, he noticed something different. The vivid image of Valdrova in battle filled his mind once again. Her majestic figure, clad in crimson, as she fought fearlessly against impossible enemies, remained firmly engraved in his thoughts. As he focused on those memories, he realized the emotions flowing through his mana were completely unlike the hatred and desire for revenge that had fueled his magic before. Remaining seated in meditation, Ferda concentrated entirely on this unfamiliar feeling before it disappeared. He carefully compressed and rotated the red mana between his hands, maintaining absolute focus while the energy wrapped itself around his body. Pouring all of his determination into the process, he successfully formed a single magic circle. The moment it stabilized, Ferda smiled with satisfaction. Although it was still a red circle, its nature was entirely different from the one he had created in his previous life. Looking at the newly awakened power with determination, he silently vowed that he would never repeat the same tragic mistakes again. The following morning, Ruri entered his room and was immediately shocked. She quickly realized that Ferda had successfully activated his mana circuits overnight, something that should have been impossible. Curious, she tried to understand how he had achieved such an unbelievable feat. Ferda acknowledged her sharp observation and confidently implied that his success was possible because he was far from ordinary. Although Ruri reluctantly admitted that he had fulfilled the challenge she had given him, Ferda remained realistic. He knew awakening his circuits was only the beginning, and that a much longer journey still lay ahead. After finishing his meal, he asked if there was a suitable place nearby where he could continue training. Soon afterward, they arrived at an open practice field where straw targets had been arranged across the sandy ground. Ruri proudly explained that she had personally prepared the entire training area in less than half a day, Ferda sincerely praised her efficiency. When Ruri questioned why he had requested such simple training targets instead of expensive magical equipment, he explained that his current goal was not increasing power, but perfecting mana control. The explanation confused her. As a dragon spawn, controlling magical energy came as naturally as breathing. Ferda remarked that most humans would consider such an advantage unfair, while Ruri proudly reminded him that she herself possessed dragon blood. Silently watching her for a moment, Ferda reflected that those born with overwhelming natural talent could never truly understand the effort required for humans to obtain strength. He then invited Ruri to observe his training. He recalled that mastering mana control always began with stability, which was normally the foundation of the blue circle. However, the red circle he had awakened functioned completely differently. It required him to stir powerful emotions, while simultaneously maintaining complete control over them. Only by balancing those opposing forces could he unlock its true potential. In his previous life, it had taken an entire year to extract mana from hatred, and another year to compress it into a stable sphere. That painful experience had eventually allowed him to create powerful mana projectiles. Thanks to all the knowledge he had carried into this life, the exact same process now required only 2 minutes. Ruri watched in complete disbelief as Ferda effortlessly created a perfectly stable sphere of crimson mana on his very first attempt. Before she could even process what she had seen, he calmly formed 3 more floating spheres around his hand. With precise control, Ferda directed the projectiles toward the practice targets. The crimson spheres shot forward at incredible speed, streaking through the air before exploding directly upon impact. The targets were completely destroyed in a single devastating blast. Satisfied with the results, Ferda looked down at his own hands and quietly realized that his mastery over magic had never truly disappeared. Meanwhile, Ruri remained silent, carefully analyzing the flawless display she had just witnessed. Sometime later, Ruri met with Valdrova inside a cavern and reported everything she had observed regarding Ferda's unexpectedly rapid awakening as a mage. Since Valdrova was unfamiliar with human magical standards, she asked how impressive the achievement truly was. Ruri admitted that Ferda's performance had been nearly flawless. Rather than reassuring her, however, it made her even more suspicious. She believed no ordinary human could perform so perfectly without hiding something. Unable to fully understand him, she even wondered whether he simply possessed an unusual obsession with pain. Valdrova found it amusing that Ruri spoke so highly of a human's abilities, especially after initially opposing the engagement so strongly. Though reluctant, Ruri acknowledged that Ferda continued to exceed her expectations. Valdrova decided that she wanted to believe the sincerity Ferda had consistently shown toward her. Ruri, however, could not forget how deeply humans had hurt her beloved mistress in the past. Determined to protect Valdrova from experiencing that pain again, she resolved to uncover Ferda's true intentions. With that goal in mind, Ruri proposed giving Ferda an important assignment that would reveal his true character. Intrigued by the suggestion, Valdrova smiled and asked what kind of task the servant had in mind. Not long afterward, Ferda appeared dressed in an elegant red noble outfit, as his formal arrival was announced. The Grand Duchess summoned all the local nobles to the Great Hall. Many complained about meeting while monsters threatened the territory, but the discussion soon turned to Valdrova's future groom. The nobles mocked the unknown man as a weak noble who could not even wield a sword. Count Olivera dismissed him, believing Valdrova herself would eventually get rid of him. Ferda entered with calm confidence alongside Ruri. Earlier, he had questioned why meeting the nobles mattered. Ruri explained that after Valdrova defeated the Black Dragon Godwyn and earned her lands, she focused on fighting monsters, as her future husband, Ferda, would be expected to govern the territory, while she defended its borders. Realizing this was a test of leadership, he accepted, introducing himself as Valdrova's future companion. Ferda asked the nobles how they wished to be treated. The unexpected question unsettled the room. Count Olivera replied that they deserved respect for their long service to the Empire. Ferda repeated the question until the Count admitted that, as the Grand Duchess's future groom, Ferda had the right to command them. Ferda then assured everyone they would continue ruling their own lands. One noble took offense, believing Ferda was accusing them of exploiting their people. After a sarcastic apology, Ferda was mocked for his exile from the Rosanova family. The noble boasted of being a fourth circle mage, while Ferda calmly admitted it was respectable despite being only a first circle mage. Enraged, the noble prepared to attack, but Ferda proposed a formal duel. Everyone believed the fourth circle mage would win easily. Inside the arena, the noble announced he would use the fourth circle spell Magic Explosion. Ferda calmly revealed he would fight using only the basic spell Mana Shot, insisting knowledge mattered more than power. As the noble activated a massive transmutation circle, Ferda instantly spotted its weak points. He fired 3 crimson mana shots that shattered the circle before activation, causing a violent backlash that threw the mage across the arena. The defeated noble realized only someone with extraordinary control could destroy an active magic circle. His mana collapsed, and he admitted defeat. Rather than showing resentment, he confessed his lifelong desire to become stronger, acknowledged Ferda's superiority, and pledged his loyalty. The nobles watched in disbelief, until Ruri silenced anyone questioning Ferda's victory. The mage introduced himself as Thessalos Walter, praising Ferda as the protector the Eastern Territory needed, and calling his exile a blessing. Hearing the name, Ferda suddenly remembered that Thessalos had been his greatest benefactor in his previous life. Confused, Thessalos could only watch as Ferda touched his forehead before firing a point-blank mana shot. The blast sent Thessalos crashing across the arena, leaving him bleeding and motionless as the horrified nobles stood frozen. Ferda looked down without emotion, convinced Thessalos had to die because, in the future, he would become the source of Valdrova's greatest sorrow. Ferda left the arena without sparing a single glance at the fallen noble behind him. His expression remained completely unchanged, as though taking a life had carried no emotional weight. The horrifying sight left every noble in attendance rooted to the spot. Fear spread across the hall as whispers filled the air. They had all witnessed the duel conclude, yet the young man had still delivered the final blow before anyone could react. Many silently condemned the act, but not one among them possessed the courage to confront the person responsible. As Ferda noticed their frozen expressions, he regarded the crowd with calm amusement. Their fear seemed almost excessive to him. In his mind, Thessalos' death was not an act of cruelty, but a necessary decision. Allowing that man to survive would eventually bring unimaginable suffering to the Grand Duchess, making the execution unavoidable. Count Oliveira struggled to understand such reasoning. From his perspective, Ferda had only just met Thessalos, making such certainty impossible. The explanation that followed only deepened everyone's confusion. Ferda's thoughts centered entirely on Valdrova's wish to create a peaceful world where humanity could live without fear. Although she belonged to the dragon race, she continuously risked her own life to defend mankind from countless threats. Thessalos' future actions would betray everything she fought to protect. Unfortunately, the evidence for those crimes belonged to a future that had not yet arrived, leaving Ferda unable to justify himself with proof. The gathered nobles exchanged bewildered glances, convinced they were standing before a madman who had sentenced someone for crimes that had not even happened. Their opinions meant little to Ferda. Whether they accepted his reasoning or not made no difference to him. Later, a royal carriage raced along a rough dirt road, beneath the warm glow of the setting sun. Inside, Ferda leaned forward, while gripping his head as waves of dizziness and nausea overwhelmed him. His carefully aimed mana shot during the duel had exhausted nearly every drop of mana in his body, leaving him physically drained. The violent shaking of the carriage only made his condition worse. Unable to hide his discomfort, he silently wished the advanced magical vehicles from his previous life still existed. Ruri observed his miserable state with obvious sarcasm. She found it almost unbelievable that their very first visit to the Eastern Territory had ended with Ferda personally killing one of Valdrova's most trusted followers. Curious whether she truly meant Thessalos, Ferda questioned her further. Ruri confirmed that appearances could be deceiving, as the deceased lord had indeed shown great loyalty toward the Grand Duchess throughout the years. That revelation briefly concerned Ferda, prompting him to ask whether Thessalos had genuinely been an honorable ruler. Ruri offered a balanced answer. In her opinion, the lord had been neither completely righteous nor entirely corrupt. Compared to the other nobles governing the Eastern Territory, however, he had still ranked among the better ones. Even after hearing that assessment, Ferda never doubted his decision. The engagement with Valdrova would continue exactly as planned, because eliminating Thessalos had been absolutely necessary. Closing his eyes, he carefully searched through the memories of his previous life, reconstructing every detail connected to the man. His attention drifted toward the sack containing Thessalos' severed head, as forgotten memories slowly resurfaced. According to everything he remembered, this very period marked the beginning of the Lord's most horrifying crimes. When they finally reached Thessalos' castle, the estate's chief butler politely welcomed the envoys sent by the Grand Duchess. He explained that his master was currently absent from the residence, Ferda calmly corrected that misunderstanding by revealing that the Lord would never be returning. Without hesitation, Ruri tossed the heavy sack into the bewildered butler's arms, before instructing him to keep hold of it. She further ordered that its contents be displayed prominently above the castle's main gate as a public warning. The butler cautiously opened the sack, only to collapse into complete panic after recognizing his master's severed head inside. His horror was completely ignored, as Ferda and Ruri proceeded directly toward Thessalos's private chambers, in search of hidden evidence. Their objective was to uncover proof of corruption. Ferda casually reminded Ruri that retrieving the head from the battlefield had already provided valuable assistance. Although she jokingly threatened to reverse that favor, and even cancel the engagement, the conversation immediately shifted, after Ferda noticed something unusual beneath the bed. Closer inspection revealed the outline of a concealed entrance, hidden beneath the wooden floor. He carefully searched for the mechanism that would unlock it, but the process took longer than expected. Growing impatient, Ruri ordered him to move aside. She simply clenched her fist before delivering an overwhelming punch that completely shattered the wooden floor. The impact blasted open the hidden passage in an instant. After brushing away the dust, she calmly announced that the entrance was now open. Together, they descended the narrow stone staircase, leading deep beneath the castle. With every step, the air grew colder and heavier, until an unbearable odor of blood and decay overwhelmed their senses. Both instinctively covered their noses as they entered a horrifying underground laboratory. The hidden chamber contained countless surgical tools scattered across blood-stained tables. Human remains and monster corpses had been grotesquely combined through horrifying experiments. Ferda immediately recognized the location as Thessalos's secret research facility. Behind the respected noble's public image had existed a devoted follower of the Demon King who secretly practiced forbidden necromancy. Among the horrific discoveries, Ferda noticed one of the territory's soldiers chained inside the laboratory. His body had become the subject of cruel experimentation, as monster organs were surgically attached to human flesh. Even Ruri, who rarely displayed emotion, could barely contain her fury after witnessing such unimaginable cruelty. Thessalos had crossed every possible moral boundary, making his execution seem completely justified. Despite accepting that conclusion, she became suspicious of Ferda himself. The laboratory had been hidden with incredible secrecy, yet he had located it without hesitation. Ignoring the question, Ferda focused entirely on a collection of research papers scattered across the room. After searching through them, he finally located the document he had been hoping to find. The manuscript described Thessalos's greatest achievement, an unfinished technique capable of creating infinite mana cultivation. His research explained that monsters naturally generated endless amounts of mana within their bodies. Normally, that dark and impure energy remained unusable. However, if the biological process behind that endless production could be artificially replicated, it would become possible to create an unlimited supply of pure mana, surpassing every limitation imposed by conventional magic circles. The documents also revealed Thessalos's true ambitions. He had intended to raise an undead army powerful enough to destroy the nobles responsible for exiling him to the Dragon territory. His ultimate dream had been to ascend beyond ordinary mages and become an archmage through forbidden means. Those pages awakened memories Ferda desperately wished to forget. In his previous life, he himself had once sought that very same research as a tool for revenge. Fate had once again placed the forbidden technique directly into his hands. He knew better than anyone that mastering it would dramatically shorten the path toward reaching the eighth circle. Sensing his hesitation, Ruri remarked that such knowledge represented the kind of power every human mage desired. Since nobody else knew about the laboratory, she pointed out that keeping the research would be effortless. To her, the discovery seemed like an extraordinary opportunity that few people could ever refuse. Instead of accepting the temptation, Ferda made a completely unexpected decision. Without the slightest hesitation, he handed every document to Ruri before ordering her to destroy the laboratory and every piece of research it contained. The decision genuinely shocked her. As a mage herself, she found it impossible to understand why someone would willingly discard knowledge capable of changing the entire world. Ferda admitted the research possessed unimaginable value, but he questioned whether any amount of power could justify the price required to obtain it. He had already experienced the consequences once before. Rather than allowing himself to follow the same path again, he chose to erase the technique forever. Protecting Valdrova's future mattered far more than achieving limitless magical strength. Looking directly at Ruri, he entrusted the destruction of every forbidden document to her. After silently studying him for several moments, Rory accepted without hesitation. Brilliant blue dragon flames burst from her hand before instantly engulfing the papers. The supernatural fire rapidly spread throughout the underground laboratory, reducing every manuscript, every experiment, and every mutilated corpse to ashes. Ferda quietly watched the flames consume everything. He understood better than anyone that magic always reflected the heart of its creator. Thessalos's mana had become thoroughly corrupted by years of hatred, resentment, and obsession. Long ago, Ferda himself had carried almost identical emotions within his own heart. If he embraced this research, he knew those same feelings would eventually consume him once again. Remembering the person he had once been, Ferda recalled surviving only by constantly feeding his hatred. For the first time in a long while, that painful memory no longer weighed as heavily upon him. Watching the ashes drift through the burning laboratory, he felt a quiet sense of relief as the last traces of that dangerous legacy disappeared forever. Rory observed him carefully. Until then, she had viewed Ferda as an unpredictable and dangerously unstable individual, but his actions had begun to challenge that impression. Although she still found him impossible to understand, her opinion slowly started to change. With the laboratory completely consumed by dragonfire, Rory suggested leaving the damp underground chamber behind. There was little reason to remain surrounded by the smell of blood and death, especially with the Grand Duchess's engagement ceremony drawing near. Hearing that reminder, Ferda's exhausted expression finally gave way to genuine anticipation, as his thoughts turned toward meeting his future bride once again.